Good morning and welcome to our webinar. My name is Darren Tolley and I'm an account manager here at EBS. For those of you who are new to EBS, we've been delivering IT services and support for over 42 years and are based near Spaghetti Junction in Birmingham, but we have a national reach. We have two divisions, one delivering and maintaining high quality secure infrastructure solutions and managed services covering IT security and cloud applications such as Microsoft 365. The other is involved in the delivery of professional services deploying Sage 200 and Sage 50 business management solutions for wholesalers, distributors, manufacturers, and service organizations. This is all backed up by a qualified Sage support team for when you encounter issues or have queries during your everyday usage. Additionally, we develop bespoke applications and work with independent software vendors to enhance and add functionality to the core of Sage to meet the specific needs of your business. Which leads me on to why we're here today. I'm joined by Steve Gemott from Sicon, who will be showing you how Sicon Projects works. Over to you, Steve.
That's great. Thanks very much, Darren, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Let's just start with the technology and just make sure that my screen can be seen. Hopefully, Darren, can you see that there?
All good?
Excellent. So, yeah, my name's Steve Gemott. I'm the head of sales here at Sicon. Just a brief introduction to who we are. We are classified by Sage as an ISV or an independent software vendor. Essentially, we're accredited to create add-ons for Sage 200. Now, this is something that we've done for in excess of 20 years. We only develop for Sage 200. We don't sell direct, we sell via Sage's partner community with Darren and the team at EBS being a strategic partner of Sicon's now for many years. Now, feel free to visit the Sicon website, sicon.co.uk. As we scroll down, all of these add-ons here are designed and developed purely for Sage 200 to enhance the core functionality. Now, we're going to be focusing today on Sicon Projects, which is quite a unique module as it does interface with a number of other Sicon add-ons in a variety of different ways. Now, what Projects is think of it as almost like a glorified spreadsheet. It's far more complex than that, but essentially it's capturing income from sales, it's capturing expenditure from purchases, any stock that perhaps you've issued, and timesheets, comparing that to your budgets and being able to give you visibility of all of that information. Now, it's installed directly into Sage 200 with 100% nominal to project reconciliation. So for some customers, they'll use it standalone. Again, to be able to capture it might be for different projects and that you're working on. But we do have customers in the manufacturing sector utilizing Sicon Projects, so it does integrate with the works order processing. We've got customers using barcoding and warehousing with projects. We've got projects central to our construction solution. Shop floor data capture, so an Android-based app for capturing time against operations. Well, actually, that can capture time against project-based operations. Central to our service, our hire solution as well. So hopefully, get an idea that it's fully integrated not only with Sage but with a number of our other solutions. The last thing, just before I jump across and show the product, is as we drill down onto the Sicon Projects. On the right hand side, and this is available for all of them, you don't have to register. There are help and user guides with screenshots and descriptions of the various different features that we may touch on today. So feel free to visit the website here to have a look at some information. So Sage 200. Now I've got every single Sicon add-on installed, so my menu is far busier than yours, but you will have a Sicon Projects, and to be perfectly frank, you will not know where Sage stops, Sicon starts, or Sicon stops and Sage starts. That's how fully integrated it is with our tables in that Sage database. Now I've got our advanced list view here and I just filtered. It does form a very high level dashboard, so I can see for my different projects, budgeted revenue, committed revenue and actual. So committed revenue would typically be a sales order that you've yet to dispatch or invoice, depending on how you've got it set up. Budgeted cost, committed cost and actual. So committed cost would be things like a purchase order that's not yet been received or invoiced, again, depending on how we've got it set up. Budgeted profit and actual, and then a bit of color coding, green good, red bad, and no color means you're ahead of the curve. Now, in terms of the project structure, we're going to come through. you've got different options in terms of the way that you use it. We've got some customers using its most simplistic form. We've got other customers will spend time and have really really complex structures. Now, there's no right or wrong answer on that, and you can mix and match the different types of projects. So it is highly flexible from that perspective. Now, to create a new project, we can just click on New Project. If you've got automatic project numbering, as I have, then it's just going to use the next sequential number, but you can switch that off and it's alphanumeric, and you can enter your own unique project IDs. But it is possible. Click on New Project, Save, and you're ready now to transact with that project. We do have project templates, so perhaps you've got lots of different projects or similar projects that rather than set up the structure each time, you can create a project from a template. We also have project estimates. They look exactly the same as a new project, but it's just where you can start to set up the structures and then convert that to a live project. And it's at this point, really, the more information you record, of course, the more flexible your output, your bespoke reports can be, because you've got more options for filtering. But as I say, we try to keep it as fluid as possible for you. So I've got a description for this particular project. That customer there is just linking to our sales ledger. Although we do have customers, we actually use this ourselves in-house where we don't have an end customer name, but we're using it to capture costs. So for my team, I can start to see the amount we spent on expenses, etc. Project manager, so in the maintenance area over here, we can set up our employees, and I've just assigned Corey Robinson. So just start to think about filtering. So I want to see live projects being managed by Corey. So again, if you set up your own reports, being able to filter that information. Take that one step further, analysis codes. So I've renamed analysis code 1 to be project type. There I've just got a drop down. So being able to see all of our construction projects being managed by Corey that are live, and again, being able to filter that information. And these you can tweak yourselves. We've got other things like start date as well, again, just reports, and then you can percentage complete. We've kept that simple, flagged that as 100%, and the project's then completed and disappears from being selectable. Perhaps you've missed off a transaction, just change it back to 99% or lower, and all of a sudden it's available for you to transact. So again, trying to keep it simple for you. As we go through, now I have got some extra tabs. For example, you'll see down here construction. So this is where that ties into here. But as we go through, if we have a look, we can set things like objectives. So again, may not be relevant, but a bit more project management type information. So expected date for those objectives and being able to link back to that. We've got notes, address fields for where we're going to deliver the project, an area for holding, simple risk assessment method statements, and a memo, and also attachments tab, being able to store contracts, drawings, etc. pertinent for this particular project. Puts the link in the database and puts a copy on the server in the Sage attachments folder. We then get into the project levels and project headers. So the levels give you project structure, I suppose. The project headers would be the consistent. Now, in terms of levels, we can enable in the background of the system 3 levels: phases, stages, and activities. Now, for some customers, they don't need all those levels, so we can just have stages and activities, or we can just have activities. It's a global setting. Now, the important thing here, though, is that you really want to think of your most complex project and then start to work backwards. So in this instance, we can say I've got 3 levels: phases, stages, and activities. If I come away from this particular project and perhaps I pick one of my simple ones, what have I got here? That one I'll just do. If I just amend the project, if I look at the project levels, you can see here, whilst I've still got the 2 levels, I'm actually going to use just an activity. So again, trying to give you that flexibility in terms of the way that you work. So let's go back to our Dublin hotel project here, because for each project, that's where the structure can change. So in terms of these levels here, and as we edit the phase, for example, you can call it whatever you want. We can assign at the phase level a different project manager, and you can have status, start dates, there's checklists as well. So again, you can get as granular as you want or keep it as high level as possible. Now, the project headers, though, would be the consistent, and these are all set up across on the side here. As we come in to maintain the project headers, it becomes empty out the box. You'll always have at least one revenue and one cost header. But for example, here I've got materials, description. Is it a cost of revenue? So we know where to put it. And then we can start to set some defaults for our accruals. We can set the nominals there, but also a default nominal. So the way the system will work is we're going to put transactions on using standard Sage functionality, such as a purchase invoice. As we select this particular header, if we've set a default nominal, it's going to pull that one through. But we can also override that on a project by project basis, as we've done here. And it means that when I select this particular project in this header, it's going to default to that nominal code. Now we can tweak it, but it's a great way of ensuring that postings are going to be correct, rather than in some examples, the purchase ledger department don't necessarily know the specific nominal that the project manager wants it coded to. So again, you don't have to, but we've got those options. And then we can start to set budgets. So you'll set your budgets up at the project header, which roll up and roll up and roll up. So for example, as I start to expand here, we can see all of our budgets there. We can see we budgeted £1,000. We do have an original and then the current budget. So if we do tweak it, commitments, actuals, your variance, and you can also budget in hours as well. But those budgets would then roll up to the activity, to the stage, to the phase, and to the top level as well. Of course, we can do revenue budgets, and those can be imported through. Now, I mean, there's more I could talk about in here, but I'm just going to leave this and actually show you what the output looks like. So we come to the project inquiry, and that's really the most important part, is trying to present as much information, but in a different way. So you're going to have people who look at a project, they just want to look at it at the surface level, but also those who then want to drill down to the transactions. And this gives you both. Now, as I said earlier, I've got our construction solution switched on. So you're going to see terminology such as applications, but the screen will just change depending on what modules you've got. But you would see there your original rolled up budget. You'll see your commitments and your actuals and your totals. And for example, with materials, as I click on the blue hyperlink, I can then drill down and start to see the actual transactions behind that, including any receipts and invoices as well. And currently, and I am the eternal optimist, as Darren knows, we're currently operating at a 62% gross margin, which would be lovely, wouldn't it? We've then got the revenue expenditure tabs as well with all the transactions, things such as invoice variance as well. And each of these you can right mouse click and dump out to Excel. So this is the whole point I was saying earlier about having that depth of information, but at the holistic level. And what I can do is I can right mouse click on here and I could drill down and open up the purchase order, or I can actually drill down and look at Sage's purchase invoice transaction, purchase ledger transaction screen as well for the details. At the top here, we've got some filters as well. So if I click on the filters, we can filter by project header. So perhaps I just want to look at my expenses, and you can have as many of these project headers as you want. Me personally, I'd always say keep it simple, but we've got a client with over 900. Most customers have anywhere between 15 and 30. You've also then got your transaction date and the period, and because we're sat in the Sage accounts database, depending on when the transaction was posted and whether the accounting period is open or closed, of course that's going to depend on what results are going to be shown. We can also click on this icon and filter and actually just drill down to one of those sections. As we go through our timesheets, we can see the employer because I filled those in. There's a number of different ways to get those in. Stock. So if you are using stock, then we can issue stock out to a project. That's going to reduce the balance of your stock, and then you're going to see the cost of that against your particular project as well. If I come to the budget, just as you saw earlier there, so being able to see within the tab the current budget, we've got a concept of planned purchases. So this is for those of you who you go through the tendering stage, so you know the items that you need to purchase going into the project. So it's a way of being able to front load those and then generate your purchase orders off the back of it. So this visibility here then gives you what's planned, but you've not yet placed as a PO. Your commitments will then be the purchase order that you've not yet received or invoiced. And then your actual be what you've received or invoiced, again, as I said earlier, depending on how you've got it set up. And we have visibility in two areas. We've got the planned purchases here, so being able to see that one's complete. This one's part, so we can see we've still got 5 outstanding at the moment. And also this tab here where we can start to see things like the purchase order numbers that have been generated off the back of that. And that's an area in the menu within projects down here. You can import those planned purchases as well, manage them and generate your purchase orders. Not for everybody, functionality's there, but you just don't have to use it. You can see these other tabs. So we mentioned earlier about the integration. So integration with construction, integration with Sicon manufacturing as well, integration with Sicon contracts, Sicon documents. So if you are using Sicon documents where the transactions are linked to the project, you can just have a quick access to those, and likewise service as well, and our CRM. So you won't have all of these tabs, but it's just trying to show you where literally where it's relevant for you. The system's going to grow and change as you add those in. Right, let's just finish off with the project summary. Now, this is something that's probably relevant, well, only really relevant for those of you who have multi-period projects. So we've got some customers, they've got some projects where they last a couple of weeks or maybe a matter of days, and then they'll also, in the same time, they'll have some projects that will last 12, 18, 24 months. Again, the system can cater with both of those. But this functionality in here, something we call cost and revenue at completion, something we actually added in specifically for the construction sector, but proved really popular outside of that. So we added it into the core product. So what we have here is on a period by period basis. This line here shows our original budget. So we were hoping for a 72% gross margin. We can then see with our actuals and commitments, etc., where we're currently operating. It gives us the option to be able to revise the forecast. Now, again, it could be the project manager, whoever it is, but at that granular level, so each of those activities, what you're basically going to be doing is coming in, and let's say you don't have to use this, but you're going to be coming into the system and saying, right, okay, for all of these are the headers that we've used so far. What did we budget? What have we actually spent so far? And for example, if I say we haven't got any more costs to complete this part of the project, we're already going to be nearly £2,000 over budget. Or it might be that I've got another £500 worth of costs before we complete the project. Or you can see we've got hours as well. So if it's labour and you've budgeted in hours, which will give you a cost as well, then how many more hours to complete. But then we're going to see a variance, and whether there's a positive or negative variance, you have to give a reason why there's going to be that change before we can save it. So the first two benefits are we're going to be able to see our original budget, where we're currently operating, but where we think we're going to finish is benefit number one. Benefit number two is we've got that sort of audit history. So as we do a post-mortem at the end of the project, we can see why we've come in over or under, and certainly we can see the ebbs and flows of the project as well. But what we can also do, and I'm going to change this to £10,000 for my simple maths. If I say that I think we're 50% of the way through the project, there's my figures also accrue in the accounts. So as I go through and we update each of these, that of course is going to be updating our forecast. And as we go back through, you're going to see the figures are going to change as we go back through the various different periods as well, because that's based on the point in time in terms of the transactions. But once we've done that, that's all of our projects now sort of up to date. If I come into this period end routines, your cost and revenue accrual figures will appear in here, and I'll just go back. There goes the last month. Now, I haven't set up my nominals, but you would see the figures to accrue, and you can now post your journal. Once you've done that, we've then got this CVR or cost value reconciliation inquiry screen. And the idea behind this is just giving you visibility of all of those, in this case at the moment, live projects. And as you can see already at the top of your year to date, your current period, and then your overall project figures. So just as I load that information in, and I'll just filter that for Corey. Here I can see all of Corey's projects. We can see them there. We can see the year to dates. So your actual sales, accrued sales, total costs, accrued cost total, and your margins, but your year to date, your current period, and your overall figures. Now, for some customers, this is just isn't relevant because it's too fast moving. But for those of you who are currently capturing all of this in a spreadsheet, because the information's going to be live as we put the transactions on, which we'll see in just a moment, and we can dump this out to Excel, that normally provides all of the information that you're going to be looking for. Right, so let's put some transactions through. So I'm going to use my job number 37, and we'll start with a purchase invoice. So nice and straightforward. Now, standard Sage functionality, and what a standard, I just mean it's something Sage is doing out of the box. So if we just go for Gasworks will do today. Got to put a purchase invoice on. Nothing too different. The only difference is you'll have a Sicon Project Analysis tab, and it means that you can't set the nominals down here. You have to do it on this line. Now, I said right at the very beginning, we've got 100% nominal to project reconciliation, and you can see there this non-applicable project. So if this was just a utility bill, it's not linked to a specific project, we can just link it, leave it to the NA and just change the nominal if we want to. And that's going to have no impact, but we've still got that reconciliation. Or, as I say, you could pick an internal. But for this one, I'm going to pick my project number 37, but we're going to put an invoice on for £140 today. Why not? Don't want that to be approved. And as I select the project, if I know the project number, as I start to type anything where there's 37 in there, it's going to find that. There's my project. And at this point, I can pick my phase, my stage, and my activity. I can now pick my project header. Now, just keep an eye here for a second. So if you can see the nominal at the moment is the heating and lighting. If I change that to my materials and I just hit the tab key, because I'd overwritten that on the project, you can see there where that's been changed. It is wholly possible as well on this same invoice. And this time I'm going to type in the word Dublin because there's no other project with those letters or that sequence of letters. Again, I can pick this. I could pick a different header. So pick an expense one. This time through, you can see that's not been overridden, and we'll put £40 to this one, £100 to this one, of course, so long as both balance. And as I save, a couple of things are happening. So firstly, if we look at the transaction inquiry, there's our invoice posted as you would expect with your nominal details on there. But also then we can see the Sicon project transactions as well. So from that single process, and if I come back to my projects list now, just look at the project inquiry, it's done both at the same time. And this is a real plus point, especially for those of you perhaps using separate systems or Excel spreadsheets is what we come across often, is there's always a delay between the transaction being updated in Sage and you getting the information to update your spreadsheet. This is happening at the same time. So as we scroll down, there's my two invoices on the system, one against the expense, one against the material, 40 and £100 set as actual values. So let's have a look at purchase orders. Now, for those of you perhaps who've got Sicon WAP purchase requisitions or purchase invoice approvals or any of the kind of modules where relevant, they of course will be able to see the projects, and that's live. It just flows through and they can select the projects and do the transaction that way. Let's put on a purchase order. So again, same principle. We'll pick Gasworks again. Why not? That's seem quite a friendly bunch today. So as we go through, let's put tomorrow as the requested date. Now you do at the top here, you've got this overall default project analysis. So we can set it at the top level, or we can do it on a line by line basis. Now, whether it's stock or free text, so we'll do a bit of stock just to begin with. And we'll go for, I don't know, let's buy a kettle in today. Oh, that's our enhancement pack pocket up there. So we'll buy two of those at that price. You can see the default NA. I'm going to pick my Dublin project yet again, pick where in the project I want that to go, leave my materials. That's overwritten the nominal down there. I'm going to save, and I'm also going to do a free text line. So we'll go call it some labor. That'll do, and it will be 3 days at £4.50 a day, something like that. Let's keep it in the same place in the project. It could be the same project, but a different part of the project. Could be a different project per line. It's entirely up to you, but I'm going to pick the labor. And again, I could change the dates on there. That's pretty straightforward. So as I save my PO, standard Sage process, it says you're going to give me a PO number 3988. Let's refresh the list there. Happy days. There's our PO. If I come back to my project and I just refresh the project, scroll down to the bottom. Again, we can now see there's the PO numbers. There's the two different lines, but this time sat as committed costs and committed quantities. Now at this stage, I do have three-way matching switched on, so I'm going to goods receive, but my system actually updates from actual when upon invoice. So this isn't going to update the committed. I'm just going to go through this process. So let's update the reference. Let's receive all of those in. Let's save that, nice and straightforward. And then let's match our invoice. There we go. And then we'll just record the invoice. There's a couple of things I want to touch on here. So I'm just going to check for duplicates. That's good. Enter the values. So again, nothing different here. We can see the GRNs. But as I post the invoice, there's also going to be one major difference as well. Because we've got Sicon Projects installed, one thing that we've also added to this, and if I look at the project analysis, have a look at the narrative. We actually pull down the description from the PO lines and add it to the nominal narrative. So it gives you better granularity reporting rather than just Sage's standard narrative, which stops at the end of the forward slash there. So that's one sort of change, but you can see here it's pulled down the defaults just as you'd expect. And as I save, again, a few things are actually going to happen this time. So of course we've got completed our PO. We've now got our purchase ledger transactions sat against Gasworks as well, ready to be paid at the appropriate time. But if I refresh this and I look at the expenditure, our costs now have moved from committed to actual. But can you see down here, we've got no actual value and we've got the issued just down here. And that's because rather than we double counting, there's our kettle. The system has now issued the actual value of that to the project. So as we received them in, it's now issued two of those items to this. And that's where then we've got a slight variance because of depending on your costing method. So that's those sides. Now from a sales perspective, a couple of options. Option number one, you can put your sales order on, link that to the lines, and you're going to see that's revenue and then dispatch. Alternatively, for those of you perhaps invoice via time and materials might be another option. So for the invoicing side, if it's a sales order, pretty much mirrors the purchase order. If it's based on time and materials, what we can do is on the project, if we come back to our projects list just a second. Against the project headers, we can assign a marker. We've also got within the maintenance area here, project rates. We can set different charge out rates, and I'll talk about charge rates in a moment against timesheets, but we can set those. And then you've got your purchase invoices, purchase orders, stock that you've issued. You've got your employee timesheets on there. And we can then just come into transactions and we can generate billing transactions. As long as the project's been set to chargeable, you're then going to see all of those transactions, what we should be charging. Some of these it's because they're out of date and all that, but what we can then start to see is what we need to select, and we can then generate those transactions. The other one that's probably just worth pointing out as well is if you get timesheets from subcontractors. Again, I'm going to move now on to capturing timesheets in a second. We can flag that. We can actually generate what we call self-billing invoices as well from that. May or may not be relevant, but we've got those in there. So timesheets. How does this work? So we've got our employees set up in the system. And if I pick myself for the moment, there I am. Say I'm not a project manager. And as we go through, we've got the concept of cost rates, charge rates, and pay rates. So cost rates, as we record timesheets, that's the rate that's going to be multiplied by the hours, which is going to then give us a cost against that particular project. Now you can have up to 15 rates and you choose what those descriptions are going to be. There's just some examples there, and then you set up the cost rates. And this is then where we can set up the charge rates as well for me. But of course, I showed you earlier in this section here where we could override those. So that's the first thing. Now, if I was a subcontractor, which is the self-billing thing I was talking about earlier, That's where you can set up a purchase ledger account, and then you can set up on my self-billing hourly rates, enter the timesheets from your subcontractor, and then you can generate an invoice that way. Now, to get the timesheets in, once all that's set up, we've got essentially three options. The first option, we can simply come into this particular screen. We can pick our employee. Actually, I'll pick Sandra for the moment for this. So for this week, she's not added any timesheets in. We can click on add a line, the project, enter the project number, and then we can enter, it could be hours and decimals, hours and minutes, or it can be start and end times with work patterns. It really depends on how you want to work. The second option we have is we can import. There's a whole array of imports as well. So we can import our timesheets into the system. The third option would be the Sicon WAP platform. So where we've got Sicon WAP, and again, there's different demonstration in its own right there, but certainly for perhaps those of you using this or want to look at a remote option for this, access via a web browser. There is actually a mobile app as well option. Sandra can come in, she can enter a timesheet. So we can see here that actually we've got Good Friday because I've got WAP holidays, so that's automatically populated Sandra's timesheet. But as I add a new line on and we pick the project, as I start to type in Dublin, again, it's just filtered, haven't had to do anything. There's the structure to it. We'll add it here. Project header is going to be normal, and we're going to say on Monday that Sandra did 8 hours. And we can add some notes. I was pretty awesome today. I mean, obviously, hopefully that puts something slightly more professional in. But there's my timesheet, and I could keep adding lines in there. Or perhaps I worked on the same project, the same part of it. I could add in multiple days. I can then submit this timesheet for approval. And we can see there, that's going to go off for approval inside of WAP. But what we do, which is, I think, is great, is if we come across to the timesheet, it's not yet been approved, and that's really the concept behind the WAP approval. But we can see that timesheet line for yesterday immediately as a committed cost. So again, our project's live, and it's only once Corey logs in and approves that timesheet. So he receives an email, comes in. We can see there's Sandra's timesheet for that particular week. We can see that was already been approved, but he can approve the timesheet. He could reject, and that would go back to Sandra. But as he approves it, we log off. We can then see Sandra receives an email notifying her. But as she comes in, she can continue to add as the week goes on her timesheet. But you can see there it's been authorized, so she's starting to build that time up. But again, from our project's perspective, as we go down, there it is there. I've done it too quick. As I will say, I'm too quick for the system. Let's have a quick look at that one again. No, we'll come back in a moment, but that will have moved across to the actual cost shortly. Okay, so that's a few options with timesheets. Often the question of payroll comes in. So we do have an export for Sage 50 Payroll. So the process is timesheets would go on in projects, and then you'd export the timesheet as a CSV with the data in the right columns, and then import that to Sage 50 Payroll. The reason for that is there is no concept of project or job cost codes in Sage 50 Payroll. It's a cracking little payroll product, but there is no concept of that. So you can't put it into payroll first. So in terms of those links, we do have an ODBC connection between Sage 50 as well. So if we come to the rates, so what we do is we connect. So we're pointing at the Sage 50 payroll database, and then you, as you pull that through, you'll see the pay element references, and you can link, and it might be pay element number 1 is linked to our description of normal. Pay element number 2 though is actually over here, etc. So you set those up, and then because we've got the payroll number, we then are able to export that information. Just wanted to touch on some other imports as well, just within here. So you'll see there's a lot of different imports. We can import the projects, um, rates, etc., and your budgets and your timesheets. But what about transactions? So there's a number of customers when they come to us who are importing their purchase invoices, for example. Now the problem is Sage's standard import has no concept of a project or a project structure. So again, to get around that, you would then switch over and start to use our templates as well. We've also, if you want to import purchase orders or sales orders, we've got those imports in our enhancement pack. And then lastly, I guess, is just around reports. So the kind of final output. Now, there's a suite of standard reports, but in my opinion, and if you've sat through demonstrations of mine before, you'll know that I don't believe there's any such thing as standard, certainly in the mid-market that we're operating. So there are some out of the box, but often you'll either need to tweak those or you're going to want some bespoke reports. So again, these just give you some ideas. So your WIP report, your budget comparisons as well in standard Sage. But because we're sat in Sage's SQL database, that then opens up that flexibility of reporting. So for those of you who perhaps use Excel with ODBC, or it could be Crystal Reports, Power BI, again, it's just a case of pointing at the Sicon tables, but that's something which Darren and the team at EBS can help with, or just tweaking our reports if you like the Sage report writer. If you've got the skills in house, we're always happy to tell you where the tables are. So there's probably, Darren, there's probably loads more that I could touch on in terms of projects, but ultimately fully integrated into Sage 200, 100% nominal to project reconciliation, does integrate with other Sicon add-ons. It is flexible in terms of you can have more detailed structures, you could use a lot of the features and functions, or you can keep it fairly simple. Last thing, just before I open up to any questions, is just at the top here, this project management option is something that we added in more recently. So if I just come through into back into amending my project, and we look back down at the project levels, as we get to the activity, we've also got options down here to be able to add some extra elements. So the operations, that's where we could link shop floor data captures. So we could start to plan in operations. We've actually got some clients using this for bespoke manufacturing using projects. Again, you could add planned purchases to those, plant hire, so hiring in plants as a mechanism for that as well. You've got work, issue, request for changes, etc. So what we've done is we've added in this project management element so it's not project management in the idea of there's your Gantt charts sort of Microsoft projects. It's not that, but it's a way of being able to manage your projects. So those objectives, what's still outstanding, your work items, being able to see your project totals. But as we go through, any notes, the work list, so how far through are we against those particular work lists, the objectives that we set. So just a different screen to be able to manage any issues as we go through the projects. RFCs is what we call requests for changes, tests as well, ignore service cases. So again, just a screen to be able to manage perhaps a bit more granularity there. So thank you for sitting through today's session. I guess, Darren, have there been any questions today before we close?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Just interesting to see that Sicon CRM has tabs in the in certain places. Does that mean we can set tasks specific to a project for particular members of the team?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, what we've tried to do is with Sicon CRM, again, because that's written into the Sage database, being able to use the task element, as you say there, and actually link those to projects, and actually tasks you can link to most areas within Sage now, so sales orders, purchase orders as well. But in this instance, being able to set a task where we've got sort of the details there, but it's actually linked, as you say, to that particular project as well. And that would pop up in the corner. You'd see a pop-up very similar to Outlook, to remind you if you're in Sage. But again, you see that pop up in the web browser as well, where that's set up. So yeah, it certainly does sort of integrate and start to bring those solutions together.
Okay, I've got one more. So we looked at placing purchase orders in Sage for a project. So what happens if the placement of that order will take me over budget?
So, well, two answers to that, I guess, Darren. There's the standard Sage where it's not really against budget, but you could have all of your purchase orders needing to be approved, and you could run off separate reports if you wanted to. But again, that's really where the Sicon WAP platform starts to work really nicely. So for those of you new to WAP, WAP is modular. So you purchase the appropriate modules and then your named WAP users. And that WAP user doesn't have to be a Sage 200 user. And the idea is you're devolving responsibility. We're using modern technology because people may not be in the building. I access it, so we have it external facing, so it's a secure address. WAP is installed in the same server environment as your Sage system, but I actually access it to approve my team's holidays or expenses, etc., on my iPad as well. But yeah, in terms of the requisitions, from that perspective, it is a great way of controlling costs before the event. So often customers will approve invoices, whether that's through WAP or paper, but the problem is you've already paid for the goods. What the requisitions does is that enables you to approve the expenditure before it starts. But as you put that requisition through, perhaps I know the supplier, it can go through a multi-level approval route. And those approvers, if I just log off here for a second and I'll log in as Corey, if we come into approve the requisitions, we can switch on comparison of nominal and project budgets. So as I start to expand here, we can see that's over budget. And as we look at the budgets, we can see it's exceeding the project budget. And in that instance, actually, you could have your approval route built where if it's over budget, doesn't really matter what the value is, it goes to the commercial director for final approval, that sort of thing. But it also ties into the nominal budgets. But one other option that you get, which I really like, is this project requisitions. Now, it's actually, although it's called project requisitions, you don't actually have to have Sicon projects. But this is perfect, and we're seeing this more and more where your end users want to, they need products X, Y, and Z, but they don't really care where you buy it from. They just know they need it for their particular project. But because you want to control costs, perhaps you've got a procurement team or you're moving that way. This is a great way of just basically being able to build up a shopping list, free text or stock items that I can pick the product, the project that it's for, but I can leave the quantity I want, but I can leave the supplier and the price blank. I'll just leave it as it is. And basically, you have a project requisition approval route. So that would go through to perhaps somebody in procurement. They can then phone around, get the best price, perhaps all the wonderful things that they do. They can then fill in the price, the supplier, and as they approve that, that would then split off into those individual requisitions to go down their approval routes before getting approved. So again, yes, you are adding an extra module. Yes, you are adding cost to the project, but actually it's quite a tangible return in terms of the amount of time saved, the processes as well. So it's a great combination in terms of that, Darren. Any
That's
other
perfect.
questions?
No, I think that's it.
Well, actually, Darren, one last one just from me, just
Sure.
literally popped into my head just as we're doing it, is if you have got WAP, so if you've purchased one of the WAP modules and you've got Sicon projects, the last thing probably should have mentioned this earlier, you can actually see those projects inside of WAP. So you can't do everything you can do. You can't drill down like you can in Sage, but it's a great way, again, of rather than giving somebody access to Sage, for them to be able to see the projects and then drill down and look at the project inquiry just as you can within Sage itself. So, for example, there's my Dublin hotel project, being able to see those. And then as I drill down to the project inquiry, so as you've got within here, you've got your project totals, your revenue tab, expenditure. Now, what you can't do is you can't drill down to the transaction in Sage because we're not in Sage itself, but a good amount of the information that we're able to do in here if I go back into here, wait for my system just to wake up, there it is. We can now see those same project totals, the expenditure, income, stock. So the budgets, you know, the similar to what we set up earlier. So being able to drill through and see those details, but without having to go into Sage or have a Sage 200 license. So much more, Darren, I could touch on, but I was conscious of people's time. If there aren't any more questions, just want to thank everybody for taking the time to sit through this today. And of course, you know, more than happy to jump on a session with yourself and somebody from probably Darren from EBS, perhaps just do a more one-to-one session where we can you can ask specific questions that would be more pertinent to your organization. But thank you very much.
That's brilliant, Steve. Thanks for that. Just reiterating what Steve has said, because projects sort of has a reach across various areas. So if you're a manufacturer, then obviously today isn't specific, but if you want a one-to-one, then we can arrange that. Equally, if you're construction based, then we can do the same. But that's fantastic, Steve. Thanks everybody for attending, and hope to see you again soon.